All right, more than one of you have taken pictures already of the screen tonight. 10 extra credit points for anybody who can tell me, who hasn't already looked it up, which Bond villain this is. But it's Blofeld, yeah. The white cat and everything. The reason he is our mascot for This Week in Woke is because I have obtained video of the International Bond Villain meeting from just a little while ago. So we're going to watch one of the speeches at one of the meetings of the International Bond Villain Society. So we're going to get there. I promise you. It's exactly what it's going to feel like. I wasn't going to do an Ezekiel 38, 39 thing, but this struck me as so funny. I decided, well, we're going to go ahead and just talk about a couple of things. So, as Russia makes its way into Ukraine, the reason this is funny, and it was posted by a Marine tank commander, so he thought it was very funny. There are satellite photos and there are videos on Twitter of columns of Russian tanks and armored personnel vehicles out of gas, broken down on the side of the road. One of the big deals a few hours ago, really, just a few hours ago, is that there were several columns of armored vehicles on their way into Kiev. At least one of those actually broke down on the side of the road, and that entire column is stopped while they fix things and while they're just literally out of gas. So make no mistake about it. Russia has a much larger military than the Ukraine does. They're still doing a lot of damage, but this is showing up more and more. They're stumbling their way through Ukraine. It's going slower than they wanted it to. Now, they needed it to happen fast, in part because the Russian economy is being held together by yarn. It's just sort of cobbled together with yarn and vodka. It's what the Russian economy, it depends primarily on the sales of petroleum, natural gas, and crude oil, and a handful of other exports. So while this happens, Russia requires all of those lines of trade to remain open. So as the world responds with sanctions and locking down banks and so forth, we hear about all these different things happening, and it has this effect and that effect. A lot of European nations have cut Russia out of some of the international banking agreements that are out there, except for the banks that they use to transfer money back and forth to buy oil from Russia. About a third of Russia's foreign currency reserves have been frozen. Something like a third of their 600 billion have been frozen. The ruble dropped something like 30% just the other day. So they're losing cash, they're losing purchasing power like crazy. Now, on the positive side of that equation, we continue to purchase about 540,000 gallons or barrels of refined petroleum and crude oil from Russia a day. So you and I are sending tens of millions of dollars to Russia on a daily basis. So we're helping them along through this process as we import from the nation. But they require it. Europe requires it. So a lot of people, they're putting sanctions down and so forth. But the noose has not really been tightened around the neck yet. As we continue to think in Ezekiel 38 and 39 terms, we need to continue to think about the relationship between Russia and Turkey and Iran and how all of this may unfold either through this process or how this process will show us how that Ezekiel 38 and 39 might eventually unfold. It's really interesting to watch a lot of these things happen. So, Turkey is a member of NATO. But Turkey is starting to sell weapons to Russia. Turkey controls the waterways between the Mediterranean and the Caspian Sea, which is how you get to the shores of Ukraine. And so Turkey has recently shut down those waterways to Russian vessels. So Turkey's just kind of playing this back and forth a little bit. Russia and Iran have been supporting one side of the Syrian civil war that's been going on for several years now. So Russia continues to send assets to Syria. They continue to land planes, very dangerous weapons inside of Syria. Iran continues to do the same thing. The war in Ukraine is not going so well. So one of the things that Russia has begun doing is they've begun pulling mercenaries in. So they've been pulling in Chechen mercenaries. They have also begun recruiting Syrians that are on their side of the civil war in Syria, so to speak. So they're pulling Syrians from Syria into their conscripted army to fight against Ukraine. In response, Syrians who are fighting Russia in Iran inside of Syria are now making their way to Ukraine to fight against Russians. Right? So it's just going bonkers. Throughout all of this, Iran still continues to work on their nuclear program. They had a failed space missile launch just a few hours ago. It blew up on the pad, so they continue to do their thing. They continue to fly suicide drones over the UAE and over Israel. And Israel is constantly sending drone strikes into Syria and Iran to break up the nuclear program that they have and that the Biden administration continues to fund. So there's all of this still going on. I mean, we're watching real devastation going on in Ukraine, but while that's happening, Turkey is still involved in its ways, and Iran is still definitely involved in its ways, right? And Israel continues to be caught in the middle. So because Putin has not succeeded as quickly as he wanted to, he has begun shuffling around his nuclear missiles. So his mobile missile launchers, his intercontinental ballistic missile launchers, he continues to shuffle them around. Nobody knows what that means because Putin's Putin. But is he going to act like a wounded animal who gets caught in the corner and he's going to pull a trigger that nobody wants him to pull? Who knows, right? Maybe he's just bluffing. Maybe he's just frightening folks, but he continues to shuffle these things around, right? So the table is still set out there. These alliances are still going on in the background, but these are the Russian mechanics who are somewhere in the middle of Ukraine trying to put these tanks back together again. So anyway, I just found that really funny, so I thought I'd share that. A little bit more of This Week in Woke. I received from a member of our viewing public one of the documents of their large corporation's Black History Month training that they're going through. And he had mentioned in his email to me that in years past, it's actually been a very good experience. It hasn't been anything strange or political. It's actually been very useful. Everybody check your cell phones real quick. All your hip-hop ringtones. But this year, they changed the organization that produces our curriculum, and he said it's actually been a very weird and awkward sort of month for the training that their corporation has put them through. So this is part of it. I'm going to read through just a section of this, but it uses one of these phrases we've talked about. When we talked about what critical theory is, and critical theory talks about oppressor versus the oppressed, and that the oppressed are the only ones who have access to genuine understanding of the world. So the oppressors, white people, don't have access to a genuine understanding of truth, but the oppressed do. And one of the phrases that's used in critical theory and in this curriculum a lot is this phrase, ways of knowing. So it's not just learning how to know things or understand reality. It's that different people have different ways of knowing. So it's, on the surface, it's profoundly relativistic. But here's part of this training. The theme for 2022 focuses on the importance of Black health and wellness. The theme acknowledges the legacy of not only Black scholars and medical practitioners in Western medicine, but also other ways of knowing. Birth workers, doulas, midwives, neuropaths, herbalists, etc. Throughout the African diaspora, the 2022 theme considers activities, rituals, and initiatives that Black communities have done to be well. You can take a couple of phrases out of that, and you've got yourself just kind of some historical training. But the second you're talking about ways of knowing, you're into the woke universe. You're into the critical theory universe. You're into the oppressed groups of people have certain ways of knowing that no one else can get and understand, and it's better than the white way of doing things or white history. So some of you and your corporations have probably been going through some of this. This was given to us, and I thought, hey, we went through this kind of vocabulary several months ago, and we see this actually happening in reality, okay? So again, not just me being grumpy. So this is an article that showed up a couple weeks ago. The author's name, Kristen Wagoner, she's a lawyer for ADF, Alliance Defending Freedom. ADF is a magnificent organization. It's one of a handful of legal organizations that watch religious rights issues and freedom of speech issues, those kinds of things connected to religious rights, and they defend individuals and corporations in these kinds of areas. And ADF has been to the Supreme Court several times, has been on the winning side of the vast majority of the cases that they've been a part of. They picked up the case from this gal who lives in Denver. She runs a website. She runs a website creating business. She caters to weddings. She loves creating websites for weddings, which of course in this world means you suddenly have put this gigantic target on your chest if that's your business. Well, sure enough, she did. And the gal actually on the left side of the picture is the gal who runs this particular business. So the state of Colorado, just like they did with Jack the Baker and a couple of other folks in the greater Denver area, they came down on like a hammer on her because she refused to do a couple of weddings for couples who weren't male-female. So the state of Colorado came down on her. It went to court, and the question was, can the state, in this case particularly the state of Colorado, by the way, the state of Colorado, these particular organizations, the Colorado Civil Rights Organizations, just awful with this kind of stuff. The 10th Circuit Court of Appeals said yes, the state of Colorado can compel her to do certain websites. Now, their reasoning, we've got to understand their reasoning for this. So this is out of that article, but the court said that because someone can only get, her last name is Smith, the court said that because someone can only get one of Smith's websites from Smith and no one else, Colorado could override her First Amendment rights and compel her speech. Never mind that there are more than 77,000 website design firms in the United States. That turns the First Amendment on its head. Think about it. The more unique or persuasive your speech is, the less freedom you have over it. Now think about that first sentence. So the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, a federal court, ruled, I think it was 2-3, that because the only website designed by Miss Smith that you can get is a website designed by Miss Smith, that's an exclusive form of speech, so the state can then compel Miss Smith in whatever they want to compel, in whatever way they want to compel her speech. It's a bizarre form of reasoning. So let's say that someone wants a signature from Eric Lind, and Eric Lind refuses to give you your signature. This line of reasoning says, because the only person who can give you Eric Lind's signature is Eric Lind, the state can compel Eric Lind to give you his signature. The only way you can hear speech coming out of Phil Steiger's mouth is if Phil Steiger speaks it. You can't get my speech coming out of someone else's mouth. But because it's that unique and you want Phil Steiger's speech, the state can then compel Phil Steiger to say whatever the state wants it to say. That's the reasoning that the court gave to compel her. The court did not say there are 77,000 other businesses they could go to. They said, nope, if they want hers, we can compel her to do what we want her to. The dissent, the chief judge of the 10th Circuit in his dissent rightly called the result unprecedented, novel. So that's a great way of saying no one has said this before. This is a novel argument. We've never heard this before. And staggering in its scope. They can force Eric Lynn to put his signature on whatever they want. They can force Phil Steiger to say whatever Phil Steiger, because Phil Steiger is the only person who says stuff that Phil Steiger says. Indeed, this is what it looks like when those in power crush ideological and religious views they don't like, forcing total compliance of state-approved speech. So the state of Colorado continues to do this. The state of Colorado eventually has lost every one of these things that they have pushed. And so now they're pushing it with a web designer. And ADF has picked up her case. And since the writing of this article, just a little over 2 weeks ago, the Supreme Court has actually agreed to hear this case. So the ADF is very excited about that, because chances are the Supreme Court is going to overrule this form of reasoning. One of the words for this form of reasoning is called sophomoric. Okay, so I'm gonna give you guys a little etymology lesson, just a word. This is a fun thing to do. When I used to actually teach in class and I had sophomores in class, I would tell them this story. So the word sophomore or sophomoric comes from the Greek word sophist. So we know who the sophists were. They were a philosophical school who debated Plato and Socrates. So if you go back and you read some of their stuff, you're forced to read it in high school or college. Sometimes Socrates is debating one of the sophists. Now, a sophist was someone in a philosophical school who would take just the opposite side of whatever it is that you took, and they would try to defend it, and some of them were very good at it. So they didn't have necessarily a lot of principles, but they acted like they knew absolutely everything, but they didn't stand anywhere. So the word sophist comes to us to describe someone who acts as if they know everything, but in fact they don't know anything. So that's where we get our word sophomore. So when you become a sophomore in high school or college, it means you think you know everything, but you know absolutely nothing whatsoever, right? So there's your extra 50 cents. That one was for free today. Your lesson about what it means to be sophomoric. So it's a good thing. It'll be interesting to see if this actually becomes a thing when the Supreme Court eventually rules on this. And if the Supreme Court stays roughly how it is made up now, chances are this 10th Circuit Court will be reversed because this is absolutely insane. This reasoning is completely insane. A lot of what's going on in the woke world is insane, but insane in very dangerous ways. All right. The International Meeting of Bond Villains. So, this comes from the World Economic Forum just a little while ago. The World Economic Forum, what they have to do with being woke is that these are the people who are funding a lot of the soft-core and hardcore socialism in the world, a lot of the fascism in our world. They're the people whose Twitter account posts pictures of smiling 20-year-olds. And they say things like, I own nothing at all, and I am as happy as I have ever been. The World Economic Forum Twitter account has pictures of open mouths with spoons full of grubs. So they're pushing a meatless diet, and they're the ones who push studies about how grubs are, this is literal, I'm not making this stuff up, how they're full of more protein than, beef and stuff like that, because beef is bad for the environment, so we have to eat bugs and insects now. So, behind the scenes, the Bond villains are saying these kinds of things at the World Economic Forum. This is a couple minutes long, and there's so much in here. We're only going to touch on 2 or 3 things going on inside of this.
We are probably one of the last generations of Homo sapiens, because in the coming generations, we will learn how to engineer bodies and brains and minds. Now, how exactly will the future masters of the planet look like? This will be decided by the people who own the data. Now, why is data so important? It's important because we've reached the point when we can hack not just computers, we can hack human beings and other organisms. Now, what do you need in order to hack a human being? You need 2 things. You need a lot of computing power, and you need a lot of data, especially biometric data. But control of data might enable human elites to do something even more radical than just build digital dictatorships. by hacking organisms, elites may gain the power to re-engineer the future of life itself. Because once you can hack something, you can usually also engineer it. All of life, for 4 billion years, dinosaurs, amoebas, tomatoes, humans, all of life was subject to the laws of natural selection and to the laws of organic biochemistry. But this is now about to change. Science is replacing evolution by natural selection with evolution by intelligent design. Not the intelligent design of some god above the clouds, but our intelligent design and the intelligent design of our clouds, the IBM cloud, the Microsoft cloud. These are the new driving forces of evolution. And at the same time, science may enable life, after being confined for 4 billion years to the limited realm of organic compounds, science...
Did you catch that first line? It was a little soft. You catch the first line? We might be the last generation of Homo sapiens on the planet. And then he goes, and this is why. There should have been a lot inside of that little clip that makes your skin crawl and makes you think, come Lord Jesus, come. So this isn't this isn't some freshman seminar on philosophy and technology. This is a room full of people who have most of the money in the world and who actually want to do these things. Did you catch the phrase, he wants to build they want to build a digital dictatorship? That now what they want to do is hack human beings to develop what our elites want to have next? Does that sound sweet or what?
How can I get to be an elite?
How can I get, yeah, suddenly I want to be an elite. Yeah, I want to. It is, and you probably have some more technical information on this as well, but through the years as I've paid attention to some of these issues, it is impossible right now to actually physically hack the human brain, to go from dry technology to whack technology, to go from digital technology to make brains do what you want them to. So they have these desires, and they're building this massive computing capacity, and they're building AI algorithms. This is what they want. Whether or not they can actually do it, we still haven't crossed the Rubicon on that one yet. But it's interesting what these guys want, yeah.
It was difficult to take him seriously when he was trying to talk intelligently and the code behind it was so ridiculous.
We've got too many coding computer engineers in the building. I know. Well, maybe if we can sneak in on their GoDaddy resubscription, we can actually stop all of this. Let's do it. Figure out what their website is. hackthehumanbrain.biz. And we can pick it up. But this is interesting. So this guy in a room full of money and influence is expressing a certain view of the world. He's expressing a view of eternity. He's expressing a view of deity. He's expressing a view of humanity. This was a religion. What we just listened to was a religion. So much so that he had to contrast it to some god above the clouds. I don't do a good German Swiss thing, so I'll spare you that one. But what did he then replace God above the clouds with? An actual server cloud, the IBM cloud, the Apple cloud, the Google cloud. That's what we're going to use, okay? There are some things to keep in mind with these kinds of ideas and philosophies that keep floating around. What he expresses, we can simply call materialistic humanism. Materialism, materialistic, that word, what that tells us is all that exists are atoms in the void. It's just atoms and molecules. There's no spirit. There's no God. There's no angels. You have a brain. This always sends my philosophy students for a loop. A materialist says you have a brain, but you don't have a mind. A mind is immaterial. A brain is material. The brain is the physical thing up here. Your mind is something else, as a matter of fact. So if you can hack the brain, then you can change human beings. This is materialistic humanism. The word there means what we're doing is we're perfecting. We're rising above where we used to be. Did you notice this as well? He said, okay, we're no longer worried about the normal sense of Darwinistic evolution. Natural processes, natural selection. You know, from his point of view, that takes hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years to get one beneficial genetic mutation. We now are going to become the intelligent designers of the next round of human beings. So the Darwinistic point of view has so stripped God out of the world for these folks that they have then put themselves in its place. They've literally put the Google Cloud in the place of God, believing that if we use that the right way, then we can actually become little gods ourselves. Part of what else he's describing can sometimes go by the name transhumanism. Okay, how many of you have ever seen a Star Trek episode? All right, so some of you are thinking, you know exactly where I'm going. These guys who get caught inside of the Enterprise's computer system. Then you're faced with the question, do we reboot? do we shut down? How do we get rid of this guy who's living inside of the computer system now? That's a fictional way of playing with exactly what he's talking about. This is what we want to do. We want to get rid of these physical things, and we want to transcend into the non-physical. We want to take our conscience, the data inside of us, and download it, upload it into a server farm, and then you exist in this transhumanist kind of universe.
In that Star Trek where the computer's going around destroying everything because they're imperfect. How can an imperfect human create something more perfect and not be able to be destroyed? Well, be destroyed by it. And the thing itself.
So there is an understanding about humanity that is absolutely necessary for every point of view that denies God. So every point of view that is progressive in this sense, every point of view that is humanist in this sense, has to deny one thing about human nature, and that is that we are evil. It always believes that we are perfectible, we are fixable. How that plays out is we listen to stuff like this that on one level, this is so nefarious, this is genocidal, that certain elites are going to create a digital dictatorship, and I guarantee you, most of us will not make it. It's genocidal is what it is. To make the perfect world, you have to get rid of people who disagree with you or who aren't going to toe the line. How many dystopian novels and movies have been made of exactly this kind of thing? Going all the way back to H.G. Wells. You've got these stratified layers of human existence. You've got elites on the surface on the planet, and you've got the cloned workers in the core of the planet. I mean, it's been a bad idea for a long time, unless you attend the international meeting of Bond villains on a regular basis and work on this stuff. So this kind of stuff is going on, and you know, when you hear these kinds of things, and you hear these kinds of words, transhumanism or materialistic humanism, or even just Darwinian evolution, this is now what people are saying about it. This is what they're thinking about it. And even though they don't have the technology to make it happen, they want to make it happen, which by itself is a little bit bizarre,
This may enable life to break out into the inorganic realm.